Dear Bethesda, I figured it out. Your biggest mistake, the biggest failure with Fallout 76. 76, oh my god. Your biggest failure with Fallout 76, was it the nylon trash bags that you I'm still laughing about Fallout 76? Your biggest failure with Fallout 76, was it the nylon trash bags that you claimed would be canvas when you charged people $200 for the collector's edition? Or was it when you thought only 500 atoms, your custom game currency amounting to roughly $5, which was barely enough to buy anything at all on your eShop, would somehow smooth this over? Or maybe it was at one time you accidentally doxed a bunch of your own customers? Or maybe it was all the weird things, like including the Brotherhood of Steel in your game even though they weren't supposed to be in the area for several decades yet, or the constant server crashes, game crashes, lost saves, T-poses, the steep discounts after a month of release? None of these things. Everything pales in comparison to the biggest, baddest, most depressing mistake in the entire game. The trees. Get it? Because of all the, all right, let me explain. This is a question people have been asking me ever since they saw the trailers for the game. Austin, why are all the trees green? Heck, even Matt himself asked me about this. This is kind of the reverse of the question, why are all the trees dead in Fallout 4 when it's been 200 years since the bombs dropped? Because Fallout 76 takes place only 25 years after the Great War. And I've been crunching the numbers on this, and things are not good. One might even say they're... Wait, is YouTube nearby? Does anybody see YouTube anywhere? Okay, I think we're good. Okay, all right. One might even say they're god damn. Flying! All right, first, let's go over the lore a bit more and lay the foundations for our examination of this topic. On October 23rd, 2077, in the Fallout universe, a big, bad nuclear war broke out across the world, known as the Great War. I've covered this a few times here and there and every which where because the Fallout franchise is to me as Five Nights at Freddy's is to MatPat, sort of. Someday I'll catch up. Anyway, there are these things called vaults that were made to shelter people from the impending nuclear holocaust, and a lot of them sucked, but if you want to know about that, you'll have to watch like some other video than this one, because this is about one of the few vaults that wasn't designed to be a terrible, sadistic, cartoonishly evil human torture device, and everyone that entered it in 2077 exited it when the vault opened 25 years later into the abandoned wastes of West Virginia. According to the Fallout 1 manual, the bombs that were used primarily during the war were between 200 and 750 kilotons in yield, several times stronger than the bombs used at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but by and large not the worst that we've tested on this planet. They were used primarily for two reasons. One, they're cheaper than bigger bombs, and two, they create more localized fallout, the radioactive dust and payload aerosols that are dispersed when a nuclear weapon explodes. Now to the trees. Radioactivity is really, really bad for all organisms. Period. The argument, though, is that most radioactive fallout should have dispersed by 200 years after the war, but only 25? Is that even possible? Well, actually, yes. You may think of areas like Chernobyl or even Fukushima, where nuclear power plant disasters called meltdowns happened, which is basically when the controlled fission used to generate power becomes uncontrolled, and runaway chain reactions literally cause the uranium or plutonium to melt through their containment units and cause steam explosions, dispersing aerosolized radioactive materials everywhere. Chernobyl will remain uninhabitable for hundreds of years, if not longer, and the cleanup of Fukushima is making progress, but it still ain't great. But the thing is that nuclear power plants are fundamentally different from nuclear bombs. They take advantage of the same nuclear physics, of course, but by design, nuclear power plants burn through their energy slowly, while bombs burn through them very quickly. Also, bombs have a lot less radioactive components in them than a power plant, so there's generally less contamination when they explode. Now, nuclear power plants being unmaintained due to the collapse of society and therefore melting down is a possibility for contamination, but I checked all the power plants in Fallout 76 and none of them are hot at all, meaning there were no meltdowns here. This isn't hugely surprising since just now in 2018, modern nuclear power plants are designed in such a way that meltdowns are practically impossible, and I imagine in a much more nuclearized society with more time to perfect things, this technology would be much more progressed. On top of that, if you look around the entire map, you will find no blast damage and no crater, meaning that in this entire 29.7 square kilometer map, a distance I calculated by going to the Morgantown High School and running the length of the basketball court, which would be a regulation high school court at 84 feet or 25.6 meters, getting my run speed calculated at 11.83 feet or 3.6 meters per second, and using this to determine the length of the markers you can place in game, 3.5 feet or a little over a meter, and then using that to measure the pixels of the map, I forgot where I was going with this, but the square area will matter later, I promise. Oh, right, there's not a single bomb that was dropped in this entire region. All the damage is from random explosions from raiders fighting, looting, and general infrastructure neglect. Seems a bit extreme for 25 years of inactivity when nobody's alive, but whatever. So it turns out that the trees being lush and green actually makes a lot of sense, right? Wrong. Because we forgot to talk about one thing. One of the most important things on the entirety of planet Earth. Water. Anybody who's been in the Fallout Wasteland knows that water is one of the most dangerous substances in the game. And in Fallout 76, a game where you have a health and thirst meter that needs tended to, you also know that you have no choice but to interact with it. Just swimming in this stuff doses you with a whopping 10 rads per second. Now, a minute of in-game time actually lasts 3 real-world seconds, so this isn't quite as bad as it seems, but you're still getting dosed with a whopping half a rad per second in that case. While it doesn't seem like a lot, you have to keep in mind that it only takes about 1,000 rads and about 5 in-game minutes of exposure to drop over dead, which means that rads in Fallout are very similar in lethality to real-life rads, where doses between 600 and 3,000 rads can kill you in minutes. Rads measure absorbed radiation, so they don't technically mean how much radiation is in the air, but how much you're actually getting hit with. Radiation comes in 3 primary forms: alpha, beta, and gamma. Alpha radiation, created by alpha decay, is what's created when a heavy, unstable atom falls apart and loses a single helium nucleus at a very high speed. This radiation is the least dangerous, kinda, because it can't penetrate very far. Like, it's stopped by clothes and paper and even your own skin. In theory, alpha radiation can cause a lot of damage if it's in huge amounts in the form of radiation burns, but generally you have to eat or breathe alpha radiation into your body in order for it to do real damage. Beta particles are similar, but they're electrons, so slightly more penetrative. And yes, I hear you giggling in the back of the class there, but if you like penetration, like deep into your organs penetration, nothing tops gamma rays, which are photons, the same particles that make up visible light, but at a really high energy level. Now, it's really uncommon for there to be just one form of radiation. The expulsion of helium atoms via alpha decay frequently ejects electrons because the nucleus is no longer strong enough to hold on to them, and gamma rays because there's excess energy to get rid of, so they just kind of go hand in hand. Now, these forms of radiation are dangerous because they can ionize the atoms in your cells, completely changing how they function, sometimes to the point of causing something as slow-acting as cancer, or straight up causing enough damage to enough cells to cause organ failure. Imagine radiation hitting your brain, for example. That could kill you in no time. Gamma rays, meanwhile, essentially cook you alive from the inside out. Fun! In order for there to be radiation present, there has to be unstable atoms nearby, and after a nuclear bomb, it's really clear where they came from. So there's gotta be radioactive particles in the water, and these radioactive particles are probably plutonium. And why would I say that? Well, it's because of radioactive half-lives. Fission bombs aren't 100% efficient, so there's often leftover nuclear materials from the initial payload, and while many nuclear byproducts are created when they go off, most of them either have really short half-lives of a handful of minutes, or really long ones, like in the millions of years. For example, uranium-235 has a half-life of 703.8 million years, meaning that, yeah, it'll be around for a long time, but also means you need a ton of it in order for it to be dangerous. Plutonium-239, meanwhile, has a half-life of only 24,110 years, right in the sweet spot where it won't decay right away, but can still be decaying at a rate regular enough to cause some damage. Now, the rads you experience from swimming in the water pretty much has to come from gamma rays in order for them to be able to kill you that fast. If they were alpha rays, the water itself would likely deflect and absorb it all before it even touched your skin. Beta rays might get you eventually, but they just give you a mild sunburn. Gamma rays, meanwhile, travel much further in water. Now, given that rads are dependent upon mass, we're gonna have to figure out how much energy you're absorbing in order to figure out how many atoms of plutonium-239 are floating in the water. An average human weighing 75 kilograms, absorbing 1,000 rads or 10 grays, is 750 joules or 2.4695 joules per second, or 15.4 trillion mega-electron volts per second, amounting to a grand total of 4.68 quadrillion mega-electron volts to kill you, which means that in the 5.06 in-game minutes it takes you to die, 360 trillion plutonium-239 atoms need to decay, as each atom releases 13 mega-electron volts of gamma ray energy per split. But it gets worse, because that's only however many atoms are splitting in any given moment, not how many need to be there, because atomic half-life is an average of how likely atoms are to split in any given time period. So we gotta divide that 360 trillion atoms by 303.7 and get how many atoms are splitting per second, 1.18 trillion. Multiply those by 31,556,926.08, the exact number of seconds in a year, to calculate how many atoms are splitting in a year. Multiply that by 24,110 years to get the exact number of atoms that split within the half-life, where half the atoms that are gonna fission have, fizzed. Then multiply that by 2, and finally we're gonna know how many atoms are surrounding the character in any given moment. 1.8 septillion atoms of plutonium-239, weighing just shy of 3 grams. But we're still not done, because water attenuates signals, and we need to know the total amount of suspended particles in the water, not just whatever happens to be near you, which means, given that for every 7 centimeters of distance we have to account for the energy being halved, which means, in short, that atoms that are 7 centimeters away have to be twice as common as they are right against your skin to be as powerful. We can take this out by taking the average height, depth, and width of a human, measuring out 7 centimeters from that, calculating the volume, multiplying the 1.8 trillion atoms that need to fission by 1.5 to get an average, and divide that by the volume to get an average density of plutonium per cubic meter of water. 1.41345 times 10 to the 25th power atoms per cubic meter of water, or 23 grams of the stuff per cubic meter. That is not a small amount. A small koi pond would have about a pound of plutonium in it. But no problem, you say. I just won't drink the water or swim. I'll drink rainwater. Clear, refreshing rainwater. To which I say, if there were no bombs dropped in the area, where the crap did all this come from? That's right, the rain. Remember when I told you that the area of the map would be important later? If we highlight all the bodies of water and measure their area and give them an average depth of 1.5 meters, that means there's over 1.1 billion liters of standing natural water in this area. Meaning, at the start of the game, there's over 26,000 kilograms, or over 55,000 pounds of plutonium dissolved throughout the map, meaning an average of 1,040 kilograms of plutonium falls per year. West Virginia has an average of 0.99 meters of rainfall per year, meaning that per year, 29 billion liters of water rains down here, or over 735 billion liters over 25 years. In order to deposit this much plutonium, that means that the rain itself has to have a density of 0.0030677464142 micrograms per cubic meter of plutonium in it. That means it'd take drinking only 75,788,539 raindrops of water before you fell over dead. Sounds like a lot until you consider that's only 657 liters, which if you drink the recommended 2 liters per day means you drop dead in less than a year. So yeah, turns out these trees may for some reason be green now, but they won't be green 10 years from now. And Vault-Tec, and by extension Bethesda, totally screwed you over by locking you out of the vault only 25 years after the bombs dropped. As the rain continues to fall and continues to deposit more plutonium, these lakes will eventually go critical. They won't explode, but they'll go from giving you 0.5 rads a second to over 1,000. These trees are gonna die soon, and if your character manages to survive somehow, their kids definitely won't. Not unless you make a lot of radaway. Like, a lot, because you are screwed otherwise. Nobody in this valley is gonna live more than 50 years, and soon it'll be just like the glowing sea in Fallout 4. Turns out, even if an area wasn't bombed directly, it can still be rendered totally boned by nukes dropped elsewhere. In fact, by my calculations, if the bombs had a similar efficiency of the 15% to the Fat Man, it'd take no less than 211 bombs worth of leftover plutonium to radiate an area this badly. So, you know, that's fun. West Virginia being in such a terrible state, even though no bombs were dropped there, means that the rest of the United States must be way worse. Like, just terrible. So, you know, have fun with that one. Sincerely, Austin.